Today, I'm going to tell you guys a story about one of the dumbest things I've seen a flight crew do in the Army. It ended up costing the Army thousands of dollars, and it delayed a redeployment timeline for weeks. What's going on, everyone? My name is Devin Rushing, and I'm an Army pilot. My channel typically focuses on U.S. Army aviation, but I also cover aviation topics in general. So if you're interested in that type of content, I upload at least one video a week, or at least I try to. So if you're interested in that type of content, please give my channel a subscribe. Now let's get into today's video. Today's story takes us back to Powidz, Poland, April of 2024, where my unit was forward deployed to Europe, and I was in Powidz, Poland, as an FSMP leader under a task force. Now, in the Army, when you're deployed, you have to have a unit come in and relieve you of all of your duties before you redeploy back stateside. This process is called RIP, or relief in place. So we were waiting on that process to happen, where the incoming task force came there, all of the key leaders did their handover with their counterparts, and once that process happened, we can redeploy stateside. Now, during this period of the deployment, the relieving brigade that was coming to relieve us had already arrived to port, and they were starting to flow aircraft into EUCOM. Now, you're not going to be all located in one area in EUCOM as a brigade. You're going to spread completely across the continent of Europe. So this crew that I'm going to talk about had made a fuel stop in Poznan on the way to their destination. And this is where things get interesting. So this crew that is making their way to their outstation where they're going to do their deployment at breaks in Poznan. And we start getting text messages from our higher headquarters saying, hey, there's a crew that has sheared a starter in Poznan. Can you guys help them out, get them some parts so they can fix their aircraft and continue to make their way up to where they're going? So I start texting my PC office. PC is also a acronym for production control. That office is typically ran by a senior MTP, and he manages the maintenance for an entire task force. So I start talking with the PC officer, and he's like, well, I don't have an entire starter to give them. However, we can give them a starter spline, and typically that will fix the issue. So it's not the entire starter that breaks. It's typically the spline that runs down the center of the starter that breaks, and that's what causes a sheared starter in most cases. So he's like, call them, ask them if they've removed the starter, and see if the spline is broken. If that is the case, we can totally help them out with that. Just to give you guys some context, this is a starter right here to the right of the screen, this black can looking thing. So just to orient you guys, this is the accessory module in the front of the engine. These are your LDSs and PASs right here, and this starter right here connects into the accessory module. So this black piece right here where you can see my mouse circling, that is the starter. Now, in order to see if the spline is broken in this starter, you have to remove it from the engine and turn it to where you can look down into it. And there is like a little rod that runs down into the center of it, and it sticks out. And typically, when you break a starter or hear the term shear a starter, what that typically means is that rod is snapped or broken or frayed in some type of way. And to remediate that, if you have a spline, you can get a senior tango that's pretty familiar with this issue, and they can pull that out with some oil, some POL, and pull that out and stick a new spline back in it and reattach the starter, and that typically fixes the issue. But you only know if the spline is broken if you actually take it off, look into it to check it. So I call up the PL, I introduce myself, and I'm like, hey man, can you send some of your maintenance personnel out there to remove the starter on the engine and look down into it to see if it's the spline that's broken and not the entire component of the starter? And he's like, yeah, man, we already did that. It's definitely not the spline, it's the entire starter. And I'm like, well, that kind of sucks because we don't have an entire new starter to give you. However, we do have a spline and we can bring some POL to you guys to help fix that spline, get a new spline in there, and try to see if that fixes it. And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not going to fix it, but we'll take the spline and the POL if you guys want to come drop it off to us. So we're like, okay, yeah, we happen to be going to Poznan anyways to pick up one of our IPs that was flying in that night, and we'll bring it by to you. So me and one of my buddies from my platoon get in a car, we pick up the parts from PC, and we go to Poznan to drop this off. So I meet the PL in the hotel lobby where these guys are staying. Now they're staying at the Moxie in front of the airport in Poznan, which Poznan's a big city. It's nice, and Moxies are pretty nice too. It's a Marriott line, and I make a joke. I'm like, man, you guys are living it up here. And he's like, yeah, man, we're just trying to make it up to our outstation. I'm like, yeah, I know how that is. Well, here's the parts. I hope that fixes it. And best of luck to you guys. That's all we got for you guys. I hope it fixes it. And he's like, yeah, man, I really appreciate it. So go to the airport, pick the IP up, and we head back to Povitz. So a few more days go by, and I'm sitting in the morning PC meeting. The PC meeting, for those of you who don't know, in an aviation unit is the meeting where we talk about all the maintenance for the aircraft that needs to happen that day. So I'm sitting in the PC meeting, and my production control officer comes by. He's like, hey, Captain Rushing, you'll never believe what happened to that crew that was in Poznan. And I'm like, what happened? Did they get everything fixed or whatever? He's like, yeah, they got everything fixed all right. I'm like, well, what happened? He's like, one of our sister units was passing through. They had an MTP that was on a crew that was passing through and was stopping in Poznan. And he's like, hey, I'm going to see if I can help them fix this aircraft. So this MTP gets out, and he basically asks them every single thing that we've already asked them. And he's like, well, let me get in the aircraft, see if I can get it started up. So he gets in the aircraft, obviously starts running through the checklist to get the aircraft started. And item number 5 in the checklist, circuit breakers and switches. He starts doing circuit breakers and switches. And obviously, on that step, you check, make sure all of the circuit breakers are pushed in, right? And apparently there was a circuit breaker that was popped out. Like any pilot would, push the circuit breaker back in. Not a problem unless it, continues to pop. Push circuit breaker back in. So he pushes the circuit breaker back in, runs through the whole checklist, completely starts up the aircraft. The entire time, nothing was broken on the aircraft. It was a circuit breaker that had popped, and they didn't catch it at all. They had spent 3 or 4 nights at the Moxie Hotel, held up the redeployment timeline over a circuit breaker. And that was the only issue. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, that's embarrassing. And my PC officer was like, yeah, man, I wouldn't want to be the pilot in command on that crew. And yeah. So I don't know what ended up happening to that crew as far as, disciplinary things go. But they did make it to their outstation, and I hope they're doing good. The moral of the story is, check your circuit breakers before you start the aircraft up. I mean, it's in the checklist. I don't know why they said they pulled the starter off and the spline wasn't the issue and that they needed a full starter. It's just kind of weird. You could have just said, no, we're not doing that, or no, we didn't do that, or can you send maintenance personnel to do that for us? We would have definitely helped them out. Who knows? Maybe they were going through some things. Maybe they just really wanted that R&R time at the Moxie Hotel. Who knows? But I hope you guys like this story, and if you like it, please give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.